Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Bobby Martins with Eastern PA Weather Authority with a special edition update here for Tropical Storm Hermine. This has just formed this afternoon at the 2 p.m. National Hurricane Center advisory. You can see quite the convection going around the system. You can finally see this thing starting to behave like a tropical cyclone. We're waiting for a while for this to get upgraded, but it finally is starting to get its act together. Part of that was because it was decoupled from its 850 millibar low, which was when you go up about 5,000 feet up. They had basically two low centers, one surface low and one 850 millibar low down here. They have now started to come together, and this is going to rapidly intensify as it heads towards the coastline. Current projections from the National Hurricane Center for the system does maintain it a tropical storm all the way up to landfall somewhere between Apalachicola or thereabout and over to Tampa, Florida, before continuing up to the northeast and somewhere nearing the coast here. This isn't debate here because it looks like the models today are wanting to take the left side of this cone track, which would really put a damper on our weekend up here, our holiday weekend, the Labor Day weekend up in our area. So we're going to closely monitor this. We're not ready to jump the gun yet completely on that scenario, which would bring rain and wind to at least the coastal sections of New Jersey, Delaware, down to Ocean City, Maryland, but also we have to watch into eastern Pennsylvania. That includes anywhere from Lancaster and Philadelphia, Allentown up to about Scranton or thereabout. I think further west from there, you're pretty much okay right now, but keep an eye on this because if it does go west and continues to go west, not just in the model guidance, but in actuality, we could have some more impacts further west as well. Now, the concern today has been over this system. Here's a satellite imagery of the system. This is the rainbow floater. Just shows you the convection, the cold tops of the clouds here in and around the system. The problem here today, and this is why I think the models are adjusting. The problem here is this system at 11 a.m. was completely stationary, and at the 2 p.m. advisory, it was barely moving to the north at 2 miles per hour. If you wanted this to behave like it was scheduled to, I should say, or what was modeled to be in previous runs, where it goes up the coast and goes out to sea, kind of like this path here, kind of in the middle of this cone here, and just continue out this direction like this. If you wanted it to do that, like the previous models showed, you're going to need this thing to start picking up and moving to the north-northeast. But the problem is, the longer it stays here, and barely moving, gives more opportunity for a ridge to build over top of the system further east, which will essentially trap this if it does get too far out ahead of it. And we talked about this in previous forecast videos. If you watch the daily forecast video I do every day, we talked about that possibility, but it was a very low chance. But now, since this system is not really moving and it's just kind of sitting there and spinning, it is given the opportunity for the timetable to be pushed back a little bit. And the more time you give this system, this system gives that ridge up north that's moving into the northern United States, the more better chance it has of coming west and coming further inland. So let's go to the models now. I'll show you the GFS. These are all courtesy of TropicalTidbits.com. Leah Cowan does a very nice job with these. This is the GFS depiction for today, and we're going to start off this run here where it is currently. Now, most of the convection is along the southeast side of the center here. The aircraft Hurricane Hunter Recon that flew in there today did find the strongest winds down here. We're still getting some shear on the northwest side here, and shear is just some dry air and winds that are coming in on the west side of the system or northwest side of the system that's keeping this system from really gaining strength right now. But I do think it's going to lessen with time as this starts to move toward the coast, and there's actually a very favorable environment when you get closer to the coast of Florida. So even though the National Hurricane Center is indicating that this will make landfall as a tropical storm, it is very possible for this to be a hurricane at landfall, which really doesn't make much difference for our area, but it does impact these areas down here. And that's why you see these. You see the blue here. The blue line is indicating a tropical storm warning, but also the pink shading around it indicates a hurricane watch is up for those same areas because of that uncertainty. So we're going to wait and see how that develops, but that's going to be just for them. Then at some point it's going to hit into cross into southeastern Georgia. Question is, does it remain over land and come up the eastern seaboard like so on the west side of this track, or does it maintain further offshore, which gives it a better opportunity to miss this area, except for some high waves and surf along the shore? Well, models are starting to lean in the direction now that is going to come inland. I'm going to show you this first, the GFS, as we go closer to landfall. I'm going to move this forward here now. This is getting to landfall point, and this is now Thursday night, overnight, or very early Friday morning. GFS shows a system making landfall as a tropical storm. However, the European model, and I'll show you that in a minute too, European model shows this as a Category 1 hurricane, and a formidable hurricane at that. Once it approaches Florida here, there's going to be an entrance region here of a jet streak. We have at the same time a trough that's going to be digging down. Here's that high pressure that's very important in this situation. But we have a trough that's digging down. This is now looking at Friday morning. So you have a trough axis that's building over the northeastern United States at the same time. But along this trough axis, there's a very strong 250 millibar jet right in here. And the entrance region to that trough is, to that jet streak, is right down here in this area. So the idea is, once this hurricane or tropical storm, whatever it ends up being at landfall, meets up with this entrance region, it can actually help maintain strength as it comes up the coast and keep it pretty intact. Now, we'll be transitioning from a cold chord hurricane, which any tropical system is, to a warmed chord system. So it will become extratropical, but it still can maintain strength. And we saw that with Sandy when it was coming up the coast here. And Sandy, back a few years ago, came up the coast as a hurricane, got to about right here, and then it started transitioning to a warm chord system that was pulled to the west. Made landfall near Atlantic City. The problem with that is the impacts are still pretty great, even with a warm chord system. So just because it changes names and is technically extratropical, it can still maintain pretty good strength through that whole process. Here's that jet streak I was talking about sitting over the northeastern United States, and here's this area of low pressure that's going to be making landfall. Again, once it makes landfall, it's going to meet up with the entrance region of this jet streak somewhere down here. And this is a very strong, fairly strong 250 millibar jet. So anything moving in this area will have an easy time keeping strength as it moves up the coast. And that's why you see these runs here as it's moving the wrong image here. As it's moving up here, you see the jet streak is still there, and it starts to interact with it, and it's maintaining strength as it's moving up the coastline here. And that's because it's interacting with that jet and producing these strong winds way up to the north. And you see that moving up. Here's the GFS taking this all the way up to the Delmarva here as a pretty strong system. But you can see the strong winds and the fetch off the ocean will be pretty good, that you'd have to deal with some storm surge and some pretty high waves along the beaches, anywhere from Sandy Hook all the way down to Ocean City, Maryland, and actually beyond that too, but that's out of our coverage area. Down here in North Carolina will get battered pretty good as well, but not quite as bad as if it was offshore for them. For our area, this is kind of like a worst case scenario with regard to this storm, because you have that constant onshore flow and fetch that could produce some pretty strong winds into this region. All right, we're going to go over to the GFS Ensembles now. This is the GFS run an additional 20 times, and it forms a mean over the center here. This is where the consensus of the track is. If you blended all 20 of those runs, actually 20 plus the operational run together, this is where the low center is. So pretty close agreement to the operational run that you have a storm system to deal with right in this region that affects not just the shore points, but also interior Pennsylvania, all the way back to about Harrisburg, maybe even further than that. But we have to watch how that evolves too. That might be a little bit too far west, but I don't want to say definitely yet, just because we don't know how this is. It could just be trending in this direction and not necessarily a slam dunk forecast. Here's the European model today. This is a little bit more aggressive. You can see a stronger system here in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is going to go in 24-hour increments here as we go forward. Let me move this back here. We're going to go in 24-hour increments here. And you can see what it's doing here as it's moving to the north, making landfall as a hurricane here along the coast. And then next frame, it moves up to eastern North Carolina. Still pretty strong. Again, it's going to maintain strength for the most part. It's going to lose some, but it's going to transition from a cold chord system to a warm chord system. So I want to call this a nor'easter on steroids is basically what this is going to end up doing. Okay, so at the same time, you have high pressure that's sitting over the top of the system. Let me pull this down again. High pressure is sitting over top of the system, which is right about here. Let me get to the image here, and here's your high pressure that's actually trapping this. This ridge building over the top of the system does not allow it to escape. This will be very important. Once it'll come up to a certain point, presumably somewhere up here like the European model shows, and it can't go any further. But it's also trapped. It can't go anywhere, so it kind of sits there and spins for a day or two before it starts to finally drift east. Okay, so this is also a concern as we're going forward. Here's that next frame with the European model, and you can see it sitting off the coast here. right there. There's that image off the next frame where you can see it sitting right off the coast here, and that would be just a tremendous impact to the shore points all the way down to Ocean City, Maryland, and beyond. And what we're talking about here is waves that would easily be over 10 feet at this point coming into the shore points. You'd have a storm surge, some serious flooding in the back bays, but not quite. This is not quite as strong as what we would have seen with Sandy. So it's not a Sandy Part 2, but it's still a strong storm in its own right. So a lot of beach erosion, a lot of high waves, obviously rough surf, and then we would have a tremendous amount of rainfall possible in these same areas. Here's the wind side of things. This is the European model's indication of winds for that same time frame with it sitting off the coast, and you're getting some pretty strong winds here. Now this is also looking at 850 millibars. This is going up at 5,000 feet. So take these numbers here and subtract about 20% off these totals. But you see these purples here are indicating wind gusts that are going to be in excess of 60 or 70 knots along the coast. So now that's going to, again, you have to lower that because of, because that's at 5,000 millibars and not at the surface. So if we lower that, you're still talking about winds that are in the 50 to 60 mile per hour range easily with that onshore fetch. So it doesn't have to be, don't pay attention to the millibars up here. It says 993. You're like, oh, that's not really that strong. It's not that. I mean, you have a warm chord system right now. So this is going to be basically a nor'easter on steroids is the best way to explain it, just because it has such a powerful fetch off the ocean. And so this is very possible if it does get this close and takes a path like the European model suggests. Being stronger at landfall will also certainly help. So that's going to be something we're watching over the next couple of days. The other side of this would be the tremendous rainfall. Now, again, we are looking for this system or hoping that it will go out to sea in this manner here like the previous run showed, but since it's not, and it's bringing this up over eastern Virginia into Delmarva and putting it right about here, that obviously makes a big difference with rainfall in this area. And you see rainfall gets back pretty far across our coverage area. It could be anywhere from just an inch or two for maybe far northern areas, but some areas down here south are looking at 2 to 3, maybe even 4 inches of rain out of the system. So it could be a good deal of rain, and the worst timing of this, because it's coming in Saturday and Sunday, maybe even lingering into Monday. So this, of course, being the holiday weekend, this has big implications on the forecast, which previously looked like if it was taking this path out to sea like this, that we'd have a sunny and dry weekend. No longer looks to be the case. I would not side with that right now. As a matter of fact, we're going to have to at least mention that in our local forecasts, that we have the opportunity watching this tropical system, or what is left of it at this point, because this will be extratropical. But we're going to watch that closely and monitor the changes in the forecast. But if you have plans along the beach points this weekend, you need to pay close attention to the forecasts. I already had a trip to Ocean City, Maryland that was planned for this weekend for myself and my family. We have decided to cancel that trip, at least tentatively, unless something takes a drastic change to the south and east. So please pay attention to forecasts in the future. We're going to update this as much as we can, hopefully do a daily video update to see where we're at, and that'll appear here on the Weather Alerts page. Thanks for watching. I'm Eastern PA Weather Authority meteorologist Bobby Martrich.